My name is Kendra Van Gundy, and I'm 34 years old. I work as a contract analyst for a mid-sized manufacturing company. Not glamorous, but I read the fine print for a living. And that skill? It ended up saving me in a way I still haven't fully processed. When I first met Ethan, I thought I'd finally found someone steady. He had this calm, grounded presence, the kind that made chaos feel far away. I fell for that version of him, the one who made me believe I didn't have to keep proving myself. His parents never saw me that way. From the very first dinner, I could feel it, the quiet judgment wrapped in politeness. His mother smiled too long, like she was memorizing flaws. His father asked questions that sounded casual but landed like evaluations. So, contract analyst? His dad said once, tilting his head. That sounds practical. Practical. Not impressive. Not worthy. Ethan squeezed my hand under the table like that was supposed to soften it. It didn't. It just made me realize he heard it too, and chose not to say anything. Still, I stayed. 3 years. 3 years of smiling through it. Of showing up. Of believing that if I loved him enough, if I proved myself long enough, his family would eventually accept me. They didn't. When Ethan proposed, things didn't get better. They got sharper, less hidden, like they'd been waiting for a ring to drop the act. His parents owned a chain of dry cleaning businesses, successful, comfortable, the kind of people who measured worth in quiet comparisons. And in every one of those comparisons, I came up short. 2 months before the wedding, his father called what he described as a family meeting. That should have been my warning. It was just the 4 of us, and their lawyer. I remember the exact way the folders slid across the table toward me. Smooth. Deliberate. Like this was a transaction, not a marriage. "We need you to sign this before the wedding," his father said. I picked it up. Prenuptial agreement. Fine. I wasn't against prenups. I understood them better than most people. But then I started reading. At first, everything looked standard. Asset separation. Liability clauses. Clean, expected language. Then I reached Section 7, Clause C. I read it once, then again. In the event of divorce, I would be required to pay his parents $50,000. Not Ethan. His parents. I looked up slowly. "I'm sorry. What is this?" His father smiled, calm, confident, like he'd already decided how this would go. "It's simple," he said. "We're investing a lot into this wedding. If things don't work out, we expect to be compensated." Compensated. For loving their son. For marrying him. For possibly leaving even if he was the reason. I turned to Ethan. He didn't look at me. Just stared at the table. Jaw tight, like silence was the safest place to hide. That was the moment something inside me shifted. His mother leaned in, voice soft, almost kind. "We're just protecting our son, Kendra. You understand." No, I didn't. But I understood something else. They didn't trust me. And Ethan wasn't going to defend me. For a second, I imagined standing up, walking out, ending it before it even started. But instead, I took a breath and did what I always do. I thought, "Can I take this home?" I asked. "I'd like to review it properly." His father hesitated. Just a flicker. Then he nodded. "We'll need it signed by Friday. 4 days. That was all they gave me to decide what my future was worth." I smiled politely, took the document, thanked them, and went home. That night, I called someone who actually respected how my mind worked. Marcus, a family law attorney, and one of the few people who didn't underestimate me. We spent 2 full days going through every line, every clause, every loophole they thought I wouldn't notice. And then I added one. Section 7, Clause D. If Ethan ever cheated emotionally or physically, his parents would owe me $100,000, double what they demanded from me. Marcus leaned back in his chair when I suggested it. You think he's going to cheat? I shook my head slowly. No, I said, but they think I might hurt him. I'm just making sure the contract acknowledges that he could hurt me too. Marcus stared at me for a second. Then he smiled. That's actually brilliant. We added one more clause. If Ethan initiated divorce without valid cause, I owed them nothing. Balanced. Fair. Impossible to argue if you actually read it. I printed the modified agreement. Signed it. 4 days later, I walked back into that same room. Ethan's father barely looked at the document. He flipped straight to the signature page, saw my name, and smiled like everything had gone exactly as planned. Smart woman, he said. Welcome to the family. Their lawyer didn't read it either, just stamped and notarized. I remember sitting there, watching it all unfold, feeling something settle deep in my chest. Not anger, not fear. Something colder, something that felt like inevitability. We got married, and for a while, things were fine. But, looking back now, that contract wasn't protection. It was a ticking clock, and none of them realized they'd set it themselves. For the first 2 years of our marriage, I convinced myself things were manageable. Not perfect. Never perfect. Ethan's parents still treated me like I was temporary, like I was one wrong move away from proving them right. At family dinners, I was the one asked to help clear the table while conversations about real investments happened without me. His mother still made quiet comments about my job, my clothes, the way I spoke. And Ethan? He stayed neutral. Always neutral. I just don't want to start anything, he'd say whenever I brought it up. That phrase, I didn't realize it at the time, but it would eventually mean, I won't choose you. Still, I stayed. I adjusted. I told myself we were building something separate from them. Until about 3 months ago. That's when something shifted. It wasn't one big moment. It was small things, subtle, easy to ignore if you wanted to. Late nights that didn't make sense. A phone that was suddenly always face down. Replies that came just a little too fast or a little too late. And then there was the distance. Not physical. He was still there, still sleeping next to me. But emotionally, it was like talking to someone through glass. I asked him once casually, "Everything okay at work?" "Yeah," he said too quickly. "Just busy. Busy. That word, again. Another safe place to hide." I didn't push. Instead, I watched. And then one night, everything fell into place in the worst possible way. Ethan left his tablet on the kitchen counter while he was in the shower. I wasn't even trying to snoop. At least, that's what I told myself. But then the screen lit up. A message notification. A name I recognized immediately. Lily. His ex-girlfriend. My stomach dropped before I even picked it up. The preview alone was enough to make my hands go cold. Last night was worth the wait. I stared at it for a second too long. Then I unlocked the screen. I wish I could say I hesitated. I didn't. The messages weren't subtle. They weren't vague. They were detailed. Intimate. Ongoing. 6 months. 6 months of conversations. Plans. Photos I didn't want to see but couldn't stop looking at. My chest felt tight, like the air had been slowly leaving the room without me noticing. And the worst part? It wasn't just physical. It was emotional. The way he talked to her. It was softer than he'd been with me in a long time. Like she got the version of him I thought I married. I locked the screen, put the tablet back exactly where it was, and stood there, completely still. No screaming, no crying, not yet. Instead, I did what I always do. I became methodical. I waited until he went to bed. Then I went back. I took screenshots. Every message thread. Every photo. Every timestamp. I backed them up 3 separate places: my laptop, a cloud drive, my email. I labeled them carefully: dates, context, proof. By the time I was done, it wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was a case. The next morning, I called Marcus. There was a long silence after I explained everything. Then he said quietly, "The clause is still active." "I know." Another pause. "Kendra, that means his parents owe me $100,000. The words felt strange out loud, heavy, final. I didn't rush the confrontation. I waited 2 more days. 2 days of watching him move through our apartment like nothing had changed, like he hadn't already burned everything down behind my back. Then, on a Thursday evening, I laid it all out. Literally. Printed screenshots spread across the kitchen table, neatly arranged, chronological, undeniable. He walked in from work, loosened his tie, and stopped mid-step. His eyes locked on the table, then on me, then back to the table. The color drained from his face so fast it almost looked unreal. "Kendra, before you say anything," I said calmly, "I want you to know I've already contacted a divorce attorney." He swallowed hard. "This isn't—" "I've also reviewed our prenuptial agreement," I continued, my voice steady, "and notified your parents of the relevant clause." That's when something in his expression changed. Not guilt, not regret, anger. "You went through my messages?" he snapped. I blinked at him. "You've been sleeping with another woman for 6 months. That's private. We're married. You invaded my privacy. You broke your vows." The room went silent. For a split second, I thought maybe, just maybe, he would break. Apologize. Show something real. He didn't. Instead, he laughed, short, sharp, defensive. "You're really going to turn this into a money thing?" "No," I said quietly. "You already did. The moment your parents handed me that contract." His jaw tightened. "They're not paying you anything. They signed it. You tricked them." I reviewed what they gave me and responded. "That's called a contract, Ethan." His hands were shaking now. "Do you have any idea what this is going to do to them?" I held his gaze. "Do you have any idea what you just did to me?" That landed. Just for a second. Then he looked away. He grabbed his phone. And right there, in the middle of the kitchen, he called his father. He put it on speaker. "Dad," he said, voice tight, "we have a problem." On the other end, his father sounded confused. "What kind of problem?" Ethan hesitated. "Just long enough." "He's claiming you owe him money," he said, nodding toward me like I wasn't even there. I stepped forward. "Not claiming," I corrected calmly. "Enforcing." There was a pause. "What is she talking about?" his father asked. Ethan exhaled. "She added a clause. About infidelity." Silence. Then, "She added what?" I could hear the shift instantly. The confidence. Gone. "If your son cheats," I said clearly, "you owe me $100,000. It's in Section 7, Clause D. Signed. Notarized." Another silence. Longer this time. Then his father spoke again, slower. "Ethan." "Yes?" "Did you cheat on your wife?" The air in the room changed. Ethan froze. And for the first time since this started, he didn't have an answer ready. Ethan didn't answer. Not right away. And that silence. It said more than anything he could have come up with. On the other end of the phone, his father's voice dropped colder than I'd ever heard it. "Ethan, it's not what it sounds like," he muttered finally. That was enough. A sharp inhale. Then the line went dead. He hung up. Ethan lowered his phone slowly, like maybe if he moved carefully enough, none of this would be real. "You didn't have to say it like that," he said under his breath. I almost laughed. "Like what? The truth?" "This could have been handled privately." You mean quietly, I corrected. So no one finds out. His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Because he knew. 20 minutes later, there was a knock on the door. Hard. Fast. Controlled anger. His parents. His father walked in first, holding a copy of the prenup like it had personally betrayed him. His face was flushed, eyes sharp, scanning between me and Ethan. You modified the agreement, he said, voice tight. I reviewed it, I replied evenly, and responded. That's not what this was. That's exactly what it was. He flipped through the pages, stopping abruptly, finger stabbing down at the clause. This is manipulation. No, I said calmly. This is symmetry. His wife grabbed his arm. We're not paying her anything. You already agreed to, I said. We didn't read this part. That doesn't make it invalid. Silence fell for a moment. Then his father looked at me differently. Not angry, calculating. You knew, he said slowly. You knew he would cheat. I held his gaze. No, I said. I hoped he wouldn't. I let that sit for a second before continuing. But your clause assumed I would hurt your son. I just made sure the contract acknowledged the opposite was possible. That landed harder than anything else. Behind them, Ethan looked smaller, quieter, like the version of him I married had finally collapsed under the weight of what he'd done. His mother shook her head, voice trembling with frustration. This isn't over. We'll get a lawyer. You already had one, I said softly. He signed it too. That was the moment everything shifted. Because they knew. This wasn't a loophole. This was their own game. Turned back on them. They left without another word. Ethan stood in the middle of the living room long after the door closed, staring at nothing. I didn't think you'd actually go through with it, he said finally. I picked up the stack of papers from the table, aligning the edges carefully. I didn't think you'd cheat, I replied. That night he packed a bag, and I changed the locks the next morning. The legal battle started almost immediately. His parents hired a lawyer, of course. They claimed fraud, deception, that I had slipped in clauses without their knowledge. Marcus helped me respond. We laid out everything, the 4 days they gave me to review the contract, the documented changes, the notarized signatures, their own lawyer's approval. 2 weeks later, their attorney quietly dropped them. No dramatic exit, no apology, just gone. Apparently, defending a contract you failed to read isn't a strong legal position, but that wasn't the end of it, because Ethan tried something else. He started telling people I was controlling, financially abusive, that I monitored his spending, isolated him, manipulated him. At first it worked. A few mutual friends reached out, cautious, unsure. So I showed them. The prenup, the original clause his parents wrote. The one where I was supposed to pay $50,000 no matter what, and then mine. The room would always go quiet at that point. Wait, one friend said once, frowning. So they tried to make you pay them first? Yes, and now they have to pay you, because he cheated. Yes. It didn't take long. Truth spreads faster than lies when there's proof attached. His story unraveled, piece by piece. Court wasn't dramatic. It was clinical. The judge flipped through the documents, asked a few questions, then leaned back slightly. Let me make sure I understand, she said. She summarized everything perfectly. Their clause, my counter clause, the signatures. Then she looked directly at Ethan's parents' attorney. Was anyone forced to sign this agreement? No, Your Honor. Were any signatures forged? No. She nodded once. Then I don't see the issue. Contracts are binding. The respondents attempted to impose a financial penalty. They are now subject to one. That is not unconscionable. That is consequence. Just like that. It was done. The divorce finalized last week. We split what little we had. The apartment stayed with me. My name was on the lease. The car was mine. I bought it before we got married. Everything else didn't matter. What did matter? They owed me $100,000. They tried to negotiate. First, $30,000. Then $50,000, the exact amount they demanded from me. I declined both. You wanted $50,000 from me for no reason other than divorce, I told his father over the phone. Now you owe me $100,000 because your son broke his vows. He called me a scam artist. Said I destroyed his family. I almost felt something when he said that. Almost. You tried to trap me before I was even your daughter-in-law, I replied. You just didn't expect me to read the fine print. They're paying now $8,500 a month. They had to sell one of their dry cleaning locations to keep up. Do I feel bad? A little. Not for them. But for what this could have been. I did love Ethan. I really did. I added that clause hoping I'd never need it. But people show you who they are. His parents showed me they saw me as a liability. Ethan showed me he wasn't strong enough to stand on his own. The money doesn't fix that. It doesn't give me back the time I spent trying to prove I belonged somewhere I was never truly accepted. But it does prove something else. That for once, the person who read every line didn't lose. And maybe that's enough. Ethan still texts sometimes, calls me cold, calculated, says I ruined everything. I don't argue anymore. I just send the same reply every time. Check the contract. Because in the end, everything that happened was already written.